So we're in the studio here with two master blasters of the underground techno scene in Johannesburg who've provided many beautiful, beautiful journeys for so many people and changed so many people's lives just by sharing sounds that I'm sure changed your lives. So thank you so much, and thank you for being here with us today. My first question is, thank you. My first question is, who's Zola, and when did you guys nip her in the bud?
Well, Fabio and I have been playing together for the best part of about 20 years, and when we started Toy Toy as a weekly night and playing together more often, we kind of figured we should have an alias for, instead of just being Dogstarr and Fabio. So I thought of long distance runner, Zolabudde, and we could always party for a long distance, so
makes sense.
decided to call it Zolabudde, and just spell it a little differently so there wouldn't be any copyright claims or anything like that. And she ran barefoot, and we everyone thought, we're going to DJ barefoot, and no, but we didn't do that. It was gross. And that's kind of really hard, actually, just to play on words. A lot of South African artists did that kind of thing, from Zebra and Giraffe to Desmond and the Tutus and things like that. So it's just kind of seemed fitting for us.
Awesome, and I like that you guys got that meaning from the long distance and playing long distance. I was actually trying to Google what does Zolabudde mean, and I couldn't find anything. So
that's also a positive about it, is that when you do search for something like that, it is unique enough to only really show up what you're doing,
Exactly.
and then have the meaning of it a little bit more ambiguous.
Did Zolabudde come before Digital Rocket, or
no, after? As in fact, I think Ryan and I, realized that kind of the Digital Rocket performance was quite specific and less, less maybe suited to a club environment, being 3 DJs and playing back to back like that. So, we felt that it was a little bit more kind of suitable to market it to a duo in that way. It's quite specifically and targeted at Toy Toy kind of playing and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And when did Digital Rocket start playing together, and then when did Zolabudde come in?
Digital Rocket goes,
2004, I think.
Yeah.
Sure.
G-Force and Fabs and I were doing events together, and we should just start playing music together, and then we, went into digital format with Ableton and synced all our laptops together and through MIDI and started playing together that way. And that's why it was kind of more of a festival sort of performance, really, rather than a sort of triplets, I would say, in a club environment. That's why Digital Rocket doesn't really perform that often. It was more when we had a lot of visual components to it, synced with the music, G-Force performing those, and then having all our machines connected via MIDI, which was a nightmare.
Yeah. So it was like a once-off real treat, if you got to experience Digital Rocket, I'm sure.
Yeah, and in the right kind of setting, it had a definite kind of impact, and it kind of had added value from a musical perspective, where we were kind of 3 diverse, quite different, but we also had this connection musically, and it was wild. It was pretty you never know where it was going to go. And sometimes we would get very kind of prepared, and we would work hard on a performance, like we did for certain Rockin' the Daisies, and there was outfits involved, and some future events and stuff like that. But it was most of the time it was just a serious kind of mishmash of music, and and a lot of laptops.
So I like that you guys segued into the kinds of sounds and the mishmash of that. So I wanted to ask each of you if you could describe each of your individual sounds in one word or one emotion. One emotion that you maybe always favor, or one emotion that when you're searching for tracks tells you like, this is the track that I'm going to put in my set, you know, like.
I mean, you get kind of asked that question, like, how do you describe your music? And it's the music that I choose to play. It's not my music, really. But it's very difficult because I don't really like to sort of box it in anything, you know. I generally just call it fucked up party music. And whatever like genres you want to put in, because there's just so much of it. Different sort of inspirations from all sorts of, from disco to, you know, one track can have 12 genres in it. You know, and kind of what I look for is things that really shouldn't be in this track, you know, really stand out scenario that really you wouldn't expect to be happening in this. That's what attracts me to certain kinds of music.
And I think that's what makes music so special, is when you do find those hybrids of sounds. That's when it becomes really exciting to me. Yeah.
I also I think, you know, the one word that I like to think about musically is definitely the word emotion, you know. And it, you know, it can be anything, you know. It can be something that's, you know, lyrically disturbs you, or, you know, audibly like is aggressive and, you know, makes you feel, you know, a certain way. So there always, like, for me, has to be a certain level of emotion, and then you can carry that even across into like a set. So a particular kind of, you know, sound that, you know, you can be like quite aggressive and intense, and then release it with something emotional. And I think, you know, that's the essence of a dance floor, is you kind of taking people somewhere and you're like putting these little pieces together, and eventually you want them to, all of this, the sum of its parts, to be greater than just the individual pieces, you know. And hopefully that's kind of what we can, you know, achieve when playing. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does, but that's just DJing.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so considering your, like, what Dogstarr likes and what Fabio likes, did you guys find it like a positive challenge meeting your sounds together in Zolabudde, or did you find it to flow quite naturally? Would you say Zolabudde is quite different to your individual projects?
Well, we have this running joke that we prepare by saying 5 minutes before you starting, and it's like calling shotgun, you know, when you're driving somewhere. So I think just generally like playing back to back, essentially what it is. I don't know, Fabio and I just kind of just really, doesn't matter who's starting off, we just kind of really slot in and it kind of flows very, very easily. I think it's just from experience. I've been doing this for so many years that, as opposed to doing it with somebody for the first time, you know, it's going to be challenging, you know. And we kind of don't really like. We communicate a bit while we play, you know, if one of us is going to throw a curveball in, or you know, we're going to change direction, or having a hard time, or not, you know, then we communicate. But generally, it flows pretty easily, and most of the time it's here, so it's our home. We're extremely comfortable here, so it's like it's much easier than it is for others.
Definitely, and teamwork makes the dream work. Right?
Yeah.
So you guys never try and challenge each other when you're behind the decks?
No, I think that's why it's easy, because we challenge each other, you know. And I think that's the main thing about this kind of duo, if you want to call it, is that, you know, we've from the very beginning we came, I guess, from slightly different angles of music, but there was always an intersect, and the intersect was music that challenged each other, you know, and you know, whether, you know, I like would, you know, play something more from the Detroit kind of electro sound, and Ryan would play something more from the disco sound, you know, somehow, you know, together. And what Ryan mentioned earlier is the fucked up party music. You know, that is where we met, but at the same time, you know, it's diverse as like can be. So yeah, we're always challenging each other. There's no doubt about that.
And that's totally what makes Zolabudde so exciting. You know, is that diversity. Once again, it's so special. That's something I always praise in selections and you know, creating that friction and then releasing you and like, it's so good.
And whether we're playing Pete Town Toy Toy or we're playing at Apartment, you know, it's the same thing. Because essentially it's just an idea.
Yeah.
That's all it really is. It's an idea that you're presenting. And whatever tools you're using, it's always the same idea. Is that we want to challenge what your idea of what you think this music actually really is. You know?
Definitely, and I feel like because you guys have been collecting music for such a long time, over those years, you've also had the opportunity to see how the scene has evolved over that time that you've been collecting sound for. And I think that's like a really good segue to kind of bring us back to understanding what it means to be not only celebrating a decade of dance music from Toy Toy's forefront, but to go back before that and to really outline how the sounds of the Johannesburg nightscape have grown and evolved, and how we've actually gotten to where we are today to share sound in this kind of way in this particular space as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's for us, you know, it goes back to probably the mid-90s, you know, and when raves first started kind of like creeping into the mainstream kind of nightlife consciousness, you know. And I think then it was a far more difficult thing to, you know, rave music was a genre, and it was the genre, you know, and that was what you went to rave for, you know, and sometimes you would enjoy the DJ and sometimes you wouldn't. So it wasn't kind of like, you know, there's going to be this party or this rave and that's going to be the style of music, you know. And then I think, you know, once the raves kind of collapsed in on themselves, then it fundamentally, the nightlife did change. And I wouldn't say for the better. I think it went through quite a significant lull in the, you know, late 90s to early 2000s. And it became kind of background music in a bar, or like deep house in a kind of like on a small little dance floor. And the whole rave culture just completely kind of disappeared. You know, truth to a degree had an element of it there, so it wasn't kind of all gone, but it didn't really appeal to kind of our headspace. And they did obviously do some really great things in terms of their upstairs floor and the curation of that and the sound that came from that. But otherwise, I think for us, we were kind of in the doldrums, you know.
And what do you think was maybe the cause of that, hitting that low and disintegrating that rave culture for a while?
It became hugely popular. I mean, raves were 15 to 20,000 people every weekend, and became almost into popular culture and mainstream. And you know, 5FM had artists playing in radio shows doing it, and then obviously the tabloid shows, TV started doing sort of documentaries on this, and corporate sponsors started getting involved, and it was sponsored by Knickknacks and by Toyota, and this real commercial element pushed into it, which is what happens. then a particular sort of special assignment kind of documentary team did and they did an expose on raves, and obviously being sort of not seeing the cultural element of it, but the drug element of it, all the sponsors just went and all came crashing down. Okay. And then clubs just disappeared, bar culture took over, and the truth's an anomaly. It's further enough from what happened in Joburg that if it was in Europe, it could be in a different country.
Yeah.
So it was remarkable how long they survived this, and then the clubs like Therapy and Gas also closed, 206 closed, and then it was just Greenside and gin bars and Wolfdale speaker and DJ set up right in the corner of the bar kind of scenario, and that what's through an inadequacy is why we decided to make Toy a weekend night. Is because club culture was gone. We were doing tour tours sporadically here at Carfax, and we had to generate that momentum every single 4 months to do something. Then we were just like, there needs to be club culture.
Yeah.
And also, I think Ryan brought up a good point about the Therapy and a massive driver of kind of house and rave music around that time was the gay culture and the gay nightlife scene. And that also kind of had an impact when that, along with the raves, when that started to kind of taper off. And for reasons we're not really certain why, but the same thing happened. Gay kind of nightlife became a little bit more drag and a little bit more bar orientated. It also had an impact on the environment that this music and the culture gets played in. So those simultaneous kind of like shortly after one another had a massive impact, and we were sitting around kind of going, well, nobody's really into this.
Yeah. And were festivals still happening like in that time?
We were only really playing like 3-4 times a year.
Sure.
Only festivals in Cape Town like Earth Dances that are huge, the Origins and the Rocking the Daisies and things like that, and Rustlers Valley, and that's what we ultimately really collected music for, with those, and there'd be small little parties here. There'd be future gatherings that were sort of keeping it alive up here.
Yeah.
And but that was really the some of it, from our experience. Mainly because the music we were sort of pushing wasn't really being played anywhere else.
Yeah.
We were just really trying to play different things. So
did you guys ever see yourselves leaving South Africa when this dip happened in the scene?
No, it wasn't really a career then, for us back then. It wasn't something that being a full-time DJ is, even now, is you have to be a DJ, you have to be a promoter, you have to be a producer, you have to be an event organizer, you have to be a marketer. All of those things in one allow you to be able to make a living from this.
Yeah.
Just being a DJ, it's pretty impossible to do in South Africa, so.
And I think that's so cool because we have such an abundance of DJs just in South Africa alone, which even shows there's such a passion behind it all for all of us who just do it because we enjoy doing it, which I think is also really special.
Yeah. I did at the end of the 90s. I went and spent some time overseas, and I think the perspective for me and the I was at that point I was really getting into buying music and kind of experiencing it, and I thought it was just more about actually going there to kind of learn from that more established kind of environment and actually be able to have access to more music and more parties and more international DJs. And I spent a couple of years in London, and it was at that time the London club scene was amazing, and there was one particular club that I was almost there every weekend.
Fabric.
No, it was before Fabric actually. I left as Fabric was opening, but it was called The End, and it was run by a guy called Mr. C, who was from a pop like rave band called The Shaman, and they used to push kind of, they would have techno nights and more, at that time, a really quality sound of like tech house, which, you know, came out of that club, which was, and it sounds like a dirty word these days, people refer to tech house as like, I don't know, but it was just that music in between like really heavy techno and house music, you know, and it was still super diverse, and it was still like super interesting, and that experience for me was very grounding, I think, from a music point of view, because I realized that the music was always more important than actually playing it and actually DJing. And when you kind of get into that headspace, that, you know, that you will buy music, you will collect it, you will listen to it for the rest of your life, regardless of the gigs you're playing or where you're playing or how much you're getting paid to do that. It settles you down, you know, and then the need and the urgency to play a gig or to launch a career it goes away completely.
Just more present in the journey of doing what you enjoy doing.
Correct. Yeah.
And sure, I mean, it must have been quite a surreal experience getting the opportunity to experience like how much abundance of sound there was overseas at this time. But how was the integration process like when you came back to South Africa? And how available was music from overseas in South Africa? And how did that music define prominence within the local scene? Were you guys receiving vinyls from Europe or from Detroit? What music were you playing at this time? You were playing techno, obviously, but where was the techno coming from, and how was South Africa receiving it?
Well, I mean, it made the personal connection so much more important. So coming back into this environment, you know, people became what your reference point for music, and that's why like connections were really strong. Connections were forged in those days between, you know, myself and Ryan and Graham as a kind of like, you know, source of inspiration. We had different sounds. I was obsessed with techno music from Detroit, you know, so much so that I ended up going there, and I was like buying some records from stores and distribution places there. But it was very different to kind of what Ryan was doing, and some of it was quite different to what Graham was doing. And I think, but there's a headspace connection that happened, and that was where we kind of like were channeling our kind of musical research and experiences, you know, and we were buying music to play each other. And it didn't matter really where it came from. I mean, most of it was a very kind of US and European sound.
It's all techno at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And were there any South African producers creating techno during this time?
I mean, around about that time, I think, no, it was all very, very, very cheesy at that time. You know, it was all very cheesy Paul van Dyk kind of uplifting. That was dominating everything. You know. You know, a deep house floor at a rave would be the small little corner of this massive warehouse, you know, and just mainly be people just hanging around, and chill room music, really. So there were like around 1998 when a big thing was when Rebel Music Academy started. A few South Africans got chosen. Actually, Graham's wife's brother was chosen for the music he was making to go, but not really on a techno side of things, you know, not that we know of. You know, at that time was also Ryan Dent was doing some really amazing stuff at that early days. You know, he got very, very popular and then got commercialized and sort of lost his way. But other than that, not really.
And was it easy to access hardware at this time in the country either, like with the new kind of innovations on the musical forefront of how techno was like driven by these technological innovations? How easy was it to get something like a drum machine in South Africa in the 90s?
That's a good question. I wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
I think they were around, and I think that it was the experience of being able to use them, and the experience of actually putting what you learned down onto a format that could actually be used. You know, that was like serious gear. You know, it was, and it's like a weird kind of anecdote from Detroit. Is, you know, when guys there started taking like instruments like a 303, for example, that wasn't designed to do what they were doing, and they started making acid house or whatever. There would be other people in the city of Detroit going like, "Hey man, like teach me how to do what you're doing, because I have no idea." And it was like clandestine and like really closed off, you know, because it was regarded as like IP, you know, intellectual property. I've figured this out, you know, I've done this to kind of so making music in those days was a different kettle of fish altogether, you know. It was quite challenging, and it was quite expensive, and it required like a lot of your time and a lot of like ingenuity and problem solving.
I mean, for sure, we didn't even have access to tutorials back then. You had to read the book.
YouTube videos, yeah.
And you had to really understand how that piece of hardware worked from the instruction manual.
Sometimes it was better not to read the book, though.
Sure,
these guys were just like,
all the buttons.
I don't know how to do this, but you know, it's making a cool sound.
Yeah.
How do I record that? You know.
Yeah.
I'm sure it must have been a whole different world back then, and it's actually quite astonishing to see how far we've come since then, because that was not a long time ago.
No.
And it's a super crazy thing to think about, like, you know, how we've been from vinyls to Ableton to CDJ 3000s, and now there's even like a new model that's out. And that's super interesting to think about, because it's like, you know, we went from diving in record stores for songs to now like getting having an algorithm that chooses a playlist for us. And how would you say that now you've integrated that process of like searching for music for such a long time, and now you're obviously still collecting music, your collection is constantly growing. Here's the big question. How do you organize your collection? And how have you found ways to marry the music that you've been collecting over all of these years with the now of electronic music?
Well, out of Fabio and myself, I'm probably the least organized. I've kind of just I kind of found beauty in the chaos, in a sense. There are sort of a double-edged sword with that, is I generally have my library by date added, so the new stuff's right at the top, and then I roughly know where a certain track or something I want to play, when or so that was added, and when I obtained that, and then everything new that I come by is in monthly folders, and then kind of use that as it's double-edged sword, because a lot of different stuff's all mashed together. But sometimes it just creates sort of like, you know, a journey within myself that's, you know, like I don't really know what this is, but I'm going to play it anyway. And the downside is that it can get a bit frustrating when you're playing. But generally for important gigs, I kind of like to spend some time and make a specific playlist for that gig. It started with Ableton, you know. We went straight from records to Ableton, skipped CDJs, skipped, you know, MP3s, and suddenly now music wasn't a visual thing by our record labels and by colors of sleeves. I didn't even know like what they were called. I just knew that it was that color and it was the blue color, and it had a plus on it, and that's the one I'm playing. Now it was actually had to know like what the track was called, and building your Ableton Live set the day before or the week before for your set was challenging, because you have to sit there and like add and map and cut it up and sit there and like spend 3-4 hours. So CDJs and USBs have actually made me a lot lazier with music. Ableton, we had to sit, I'm playing tonight, well, this afternoon I'm sitting and building a live set for tonight, and there's pros and cons with both of it,
Definitely.
Getting a whole bunch of new music and just listening to it and making sure that you know roughly what emotion each of those tracks creates is probably where I sit with it.
Sure.
Yeah, I think this has been something that I've never really quite got a handle on, and that's organizing music. And I think I do a similar process to Ryan, is where, for the most part, I'm looking at the newer stuff, because I know it's, being played out less, and I'm quite enthusiastic about it, and I've just bought it, and I'm like, yes, So I'm looking at the newer stuff, and later, further down the line, I'll start kind of getting to the other stuff. But I think it's super important, and I think what really changed my kind of my DJing per se, and it's something that Ryan touched on, is listening to the music you buy, and not just kind of having it on in the car while you're driving, but I would like to kind of sit down on my couch, put it on a really nice sound system, and have no other distractions, and actually like process that piece of music. What is it really saying to you? Because a lot of the times, it would start one way, and it makes like, oh, this is this kind of tune, and immediately you kind of go, that I know what this is about, and then it changes direction, like so much of the music we like, and it becomes something else completely. And if you haven't really paid attention to the music you're buying, you're gonna battle to have a coherence, but at the same time you're also either gonna be very linear and very programmed, because you only like a certain sound of music and you only like a certain kind of like thing, and you're not going to be very diverse. So there's double like challenges to
as well as when I'm collecting music. There's something that really grabs me up, is I sort of create a scenario, the perfect environment, perfect dance floor, perfect place, perfect time of day that this track would be perfectly suited for. And then I only get to play that when it sort of resembles that mental picture, and go, okay, well, this I'm keeping for that moment and that time and space where this will be communicated the best. And that's, it's a lot of music that I have never ever played before, because it's just too valuable for it not to go down the way that I've pictured in my mind when by listening to it and sourcing it for the first time. And that's kind of also a con, because you like
expectation,
because you like you got all this music you have never really found the perfect place to play, and so it's kind of how I position my music.
And do you ever find yourself resurrecting any past dance floor detonators that
Always.
you've like let off at specific occasions, and then like that brings you back to that moment where you remember the specific moment where you like played this specific song, and it always holds a close space to your heart, and then you replay it in that space?
Always.
Yeah.
Always. Those are the special ones,
Yeah.
Especially, playing something from the 70s that sounds like it was made yesterday.
Yeah.
Which people think, oh, this is a great techno track, but If only you knew, you know.
Disco track.
Yeah.
That's definitely my favorite part about selecting music is that visualization of when I get to share it and how it's gonna feel. It's so exciting for me. Yeah.
Do you guys get sent demos from local artists?
Sadly, not enough, and I don't know if there's a kind of like, yeah, I do. If somebody sends me a tune that they've made, then I'll definitely honor it enough to give it a proper listen. Mixes, on the other hand, are a lot harder for me to kind of like dedicate that amount of time to. But yes, I think I'd like to hear more of what guys are playing. It's particularly kind of like stuff that they resonate with from being at a Toy Toy party.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I kind of I think there's a lot of kind of good productions coming out, you know, and I think there's been some amazing kind of progress in terms of our musical trajectory. Sadly, I kind of my time in the studio is very, very, very kind of limited, and I've had a love-hate relationship with it for many years. So I don't really kind of spend that much time. So I really do appreciate when guys have the kind of time and diligence and understanding to sit there and actually make music. So yeah, I'm happy to kind of receive stuff from guys and listen to it, and I've heard some good stuff lately.
Yeah. We're busy actually just sort of collecting a whole bunch of music from local producers for the launch of Toy Toy's label. So, and you know, we've received some really good stuff so far, and just kind of haven't really figured out what we're going to do with it yet, but yeah, just putting the call out, you know.
That's so exciting. I feel like if Toy Toy had to have a label, it would just solidify what we come here to do and be even more.
Yes,
you know,
Definitely.
I mean, it's about time. I'm sure it's been in the
about
pipeline for a while.
for so long it has, you know, and we just haven't. It all starts with the music.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, if you don't have music, you can't launch a label. It doesn't matter how many cool ideas you have, you know. So, and it's pushing me to spend more time in the studio, you know,
Yeah.
which I hardly find time for, which I have a lot of time for.
But you've given yourself deadlines.
Yes, yeah, it was last week.
I'm sure. But you know, everything unravels as it needs to, and to not put pressure onto it, but to know that the seed has been planted and to allow those little roots to grow and those little blossoms to rise. I think everyone's going to be looking very forward to the day that Toy Toy releases their first
Yes.
compilation.
Yeah, it's been very much an ethos of the brand, is to kind of go with a certain amount of flow and what feels right at the time, and it's always kind of served us really well. That, you know, reactionary decisions don't really get made that often, and it's more about like everything's a considered approach, and you know, if it flows, then it's right, and it means it's working, and there's the right energy behind it.
Yeah, sure. And any other exciting things on the forefront that...
Just looking forward to getting our Fridays back
Yeah, wow.
at some point.
Yeah.
Sure, it's been difficult navigating this space.
It has.
You guys have done well though.
Yeah.
I think Morning Glory, I always go back to the first ever Morning Glory that we had the blessed opportunity to share together. And I think just like from my personal reflection on this space, like after going abroad and experiencing things elsewhere, there's nothing more potent and present than coming back to a space that means so much to me and also means so much to a lot of people, to see the growth that the scene has experienced over these last few years, and even just the fact that a 5 a.m. party happened in Johannesburg during COVID, I think it sent the scene into a whole different dimension. I think it's opened up a portal for us to be able to share harder, faster techno, and not be bound to a specific time in which that moment of liberation in the presence of high vibrational sound needs to be experienced. Like, techno doesn't have to be a 5 a.m. dance floor experience, although we love that. But
yeah, I think if you look at the genre in itself, it's always tried not to limit itself, in a particular way, and I've always that's always resonated with me a lot, going back to the Detroit sound. It never really, you couldn't pin it down, there was some hard aggressive stuff, there was some melodic stuff, it was just, and I think that ethos does need to translate into the experience of parties. Why is it not okay to party at 5 a.m? Or why is it why do you feel limited in a particular kind of way by a party? And I think the culture in South Africa is, partying happens. Also, an age thing, partying happens when you're 20 to 25, and it happens from 9 p.m. till 4 a.m. and you feel terrible the next day, and you're like, that was just I'll never do that again, and then you grow out of it, so to speak, and you kind of move on. And I think all of these kind of limitations or societal limitations from what I believe to be a conservative mindset in South Africa, we've always had that about our nightlife, and kind of there were these offshoots of really kind of pushing the boundaries, of course, but for the most part we come from relatively conservative homes, and to break these kind of boundaries, when it comes to what time you're partying and for how long you party in your life, and go to clubs and enjoy music in clubs, these need to be challenged.
And I love that, and it kind of brings me back to just reminiscing on the core of what techno in Detroit stood for, which was occupying space. And it's always been about occupying space, and for me I felt like maybe we spent some time figuring out what it would mean to adhere to the laws of space, and constantly falling into a dominating construct within nightlife. And I think that this gave us the opportunity to really allow us to disintegrate those constructs and to come back to the core of what it means for us to occupy space, for sound to occupy space, and to constantly be challenging the laws of the spaces that we choose to come together and gather in. And I really loved, I'm going to go back to it, but Ryan always said, what we resist persists. And and it was just really beautiful to see how going into that space of abandon really opened up so many doors for new experiences for so many people. And I've been living for the fact that we finally got an espresso machine and that I can finally have my smoothie on the dance floor. So I thank you.
I mean, I think we kind of going to a club, for example, overseas, in a country where this kind of environment's been percolating for many, many, many years, and there's no reason why you can't wake up have some breakfast, go to a club, party, or have a smoothie, or whatever you want to do, and really let loose, and leave when you're done.
You can party and have a smoothie at the same time.
You can party, have a smoothie. You can do there is no real limitations, and I think this, right? We've been forced to look at these things in South Africa, and maybe it'll expedite kind of a complete revolution and kind of going out.
And I think it's also a good way to bring mindfulness back into the space. You don't have to come and enjoy really good music in a very open-minded, expressive space and get super fucked up. You know? Like you don't. You can come and enjoy it completely.
Breaking
sober.
stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's again like with the
Techno-bricky.
stereotypes. Yeah. The
Techno-bricky,
stereotypes with time. It's also the stereotypes or perceptions that we have when it means how we come into this space. You know, we can deconstruct it all and just reinvent it, and that's what we're doing. That's what you guys are doing.
There are also, you know, there are limitations that we have breaking the social constructs, sure, and the sort of boundaries that our upbringings or laws or whatever have placed on it. But you know, there's other challenges that come into that. Is logistical challenges. You know, it's, you know, in the middle of winter here, getting someone here at 5 a.m. is challenging. You know, and we don't have the public transport to support that. You know, and those kind of things. You know, partying on a weekly basis for people that are traveling from Fourways or from wherever. You know, it's 300-400 rand an Uber one way. You know, and whereas it makes it a lot easier in Berlin or London or wherever, where you can just hop on a tram or a bus for €3. You know, it makes so it makes the task at hand a lot more difficult, and but you know it's a task worth taking.
It's also special to see, like, you have this community that will spend 300-400 rand every weekend to come and party, to come and see.
People do it.
Yeah.
We used to rent minibus taxis to drive us from Hartbeespoort to Toy Toy on a Friday night. Yes, in fact, we actually used to ask our school bus driver to drive us in one of our parents' cars to Toy Toy on a Friday night, and then to sit in the car the whole night waiting for us and take us home. Like, kids make the missions for the music. Like, they will find a way to get to the club.
Yeah. I hope you tipped him nicely, bro.
He used to get the biggest blessings, always. Pietro, shout out to Pietrus. If you're listening to us right now. Pietrus.
Thank you for getting us safely
Wherever
there
you
and
are.
back. Yeah.
Like, that's hilarious. Hope you didn't share the stories to the school about what you guys were doing.
No
You were in
comments.
school to Toy Toy?
No comments.
No comments. No comments.
No more comments for the things kids do for the techno.
Yeah,
We do a lot for it. Thanks to you guys for bringing it forth to us as well.
Yeah.
I think, like, you know, Toy Toy has been the only means for us to really access these things, and a lot of people experience these realms of music and free expression for the first time in this space, you know.
Especially in such a conservative culture like South Africa.
And it's like a lot of us came from Toy Toy. Like, that was always the first place where we came to as youngsters that were seeking a different kind of experience and a different kind of sound. And, you know, I'd never heard techno before I came to Toy Toy. I didn't even know what techno was. I just heard of this party that was called Toy Toy, and it was in Braamfontein at the Alexander Theatre, and I went. And since then, it's been a completely liberating and high vibrational energetic space that I've entered since being in the presence of techno.
I think what's kind of worth adding is that, you know, what we kind of, our vision in that hasn't been that overly complicated, you know, and what we've really always kind of nurtured rather than anything else is what experience are people going to have when, you know, and for us it always began with the sound system, because, you know, for one, you know, that is the real, like, that's where you get the music from. You know, you need to feel it, you need to hear it, it needs to be crystal clear, and it needs to be really good quality. So that's always been one of our kind of most important considerations around how we curate an experience. And then through that, we've kind of looked at it and gone, well, you know, how do we make this space the experience that we want, you know, for people to feel, and it's you know, it's seldom something that you write down, you know, it's a feeling. And I've always likened it to the fact that, you know, it's not something you can learn, it's something you have to feel and you have to understand and you have to experience. So for young kind of promoters and people who want to DJ, and that there is no substitute for being on a dance floor where you can really like feel the music, experience it with other people, and have a proper moving experience, you know. And I think that's where you, if that's your foundation, then you will kind of succeed.
Amen.
Moment of silence for the dance floor.
Just honestly, there's no greater teacher than the dance floor, and I fully stand by that. I'm sure we all do.
Yeah, your differences seem to go out the window, you know.
Yeah.
And it becomes very kind of liberating. You maybe kind of break some barriers in yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And for me, it's always been so special to be able to come here, because I've never resonated like too much with the mainstream gay culture that exists in our country. And whenever I come here, you know, I feel completely safe, completely accepted. And what's even more beautiful about this space is it's not just that you can come here and be gay. It's like that gayness interacts with the straightness, which interacts with whatever that is, which interacts with whatever that is. It's so diverse and beautiful, and we all just come together. And like you said, those differences are removed. And yeah, it's been so beautiful to have this space for me, and I can't wait to bring more gays back. More gays. Yeah, we need them. We need more.
And I love.
Sorry, it is like you know, it tends to kind of be a microcosm of the world, you know, and stuff and people who kind of come and go, you know, well, that's like, you know, criticize about this or that, or those kinds of people or those kinds of things, or what they're doing and what they're, it's very much a mirror, you know. And if you would like your tolerance challenged, and if you would like your kind of perspective on the world challenged, then come and have a look at a diverse dance floor and people in a space where they really are kind of like allowed to do what they want to do, as long as it's kind of like not really harming others. Then you really start to kind of see how do you view the world, you know? How do you perceive it? Are you a tolerant person, or are you intolerant? And you know, and if that doesn't work for you, then you probably need to work on your tolerance, you know?
Work on yourself.
Yeah.
The medicine.
I just love how these spaces just allow us to come together and just interrogate what it means to be human, and what it means to exercise raw authenticity, whether it be through movement or sound or just sharing space together.
It's like the tribal dance around the fire, but it's the International Rainbow Tribe.
Yeah.
The dystopian future rainbow tribe dancing around the fire, but we dance around a pole in front of the rainbow system.
Cheers to many more.
Cheers to many more, guys.
Many more.
Yeah. Can't wait for fucking COVID to be over.
Yeah, and this and the curfew to go.
I can't wait for the 10th birthday party.
Yeah.
And also, guys, like, thank you so much for holding so much space for us youngins to kind of softly nudge us, and just also kind of guide and teach by just doing what you do, living in your truth, and you know, allowing and giving us those affirmations to keep going, you know. And
yeah, well, I mean, I think we also owe a great deal of thanks to the people of the city, and you know, every kind of foot through the door is an endorsement of what we do, and we appreciate that. And you know, we've gotten to do something we really love doing, and we're really passionate about and enthusiastic about, and that is a privilege. That is a huge privilege, you know.
Yeah.
happy for you guys.
Yeah, well, really, it wouldn't be what it is without the people that come here.
Exactly.
You know, regardless of, you know, we just put the space here, you know, and people resonate with it, and it's really just, that's where it begins and ends, you know.
Yeah.
and wouldn't be anything without people that love it so much, you know.
And on that note, I mean, there have been countless compliments from whether it's DJs from out of town or DJs who have come from overseas on our crowd. And I cannot like understate this, you know, and I've noticed that when a lot of kind of internationals are really paying attention to what's happening on the dance floor, it shows that the crowd is really paying attention to what's happening on the dance floor and what's happening to the DJ. They are really paying a lot of attention. Their focus is 100% on what's going on the dance floor and the music and that kind of thing.
Toy Toy is quite an intimate space. It's especially like European clubs are quite huge and big, and you kind of get lost in that space where Toy Toy is very small, intimate. You like face to face with the DJ. They're not put up on a pedestal. Correct. They're out in front of you, which is, I think, it's fucking cool.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had guys here that, like, you know, will be a lot deeper or a lot slower than some of the other DJs that kind of play here, and it's absolutely no problem, because if you're delivering something with real like authenticity and playing like really well, it doesn't. Toy Toy will appreciate that.
Yeah, good music is good music, and nothing beats good music.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I mean, sitting in this room is just an ode to all the good music that has been shared in this space. Like, blows my mind every time I look at all the names up on this wall.
Yeah, me too. Actually.
What's been one of your favorites? Like, I know it's hard to choose a favorite, but like, if each one of you could pick like a moment that you'll always remember.
Mine's Devious one all night. That was a fucking whirlwind.
It's such a hard choice.
Happened, yeah.
Did we do this?
Yeah, I mean, I was in Berghain for Devious Ones all night, so I would say the first time Devious One played here, I mean, Robert Flugel was amazing, you know, Etap Carl, you know, like all of them, you know, Ryan Elliott, you know, even going back to just giving sort of a lot of credit to the dance floor here, you know, the people that come through here. Constantine Siebold,
my best Toy night.
He was quite amazed by the fact of how young the audience is here and how receptive they were to the more challenging music he delivered. So the more sort of safe he played, the less response he got. And the more challenging he played, the more response he got. And on the way home after the gig in the car, he was like, it takes years for someone's ear to become discerning enough to be able to resonate with challenging party music. And how does a dance floor of 20-somethings have that kind of level of that took him years to get, and that for me was a great compliment for
you guys
for the dance floor, you know,
and for the curation and the mindfulness surrounding the types of, or the quality that you've allowed in the space, you know.
Yeah, when we started this weekend out, you know, it was always going, you know, we put a lot of noses out of joint because, you know, we were very strict with our bookings, and we still are, you know, and because that's the reason. And it's not just for bring your mates and have a party, you know, it has to have an idea, and that idea must always be preserved, because then you'll get, the dance floor gets a compliment like that from Constantine, you know.
Exactly. Sure. Well, I think that was really nice talking to you guys.
You think, or are you sure?
I'm just like sitting here wondering, like, where am I? What am I doing? No, I'm joking. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. That was so insightful. I kept having to like pinch myself and be like, whoa, like you're actually here receiving all of this really beautiful and personal information from two amazing selectors, and event organisers.
Pioneers.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you, and we value what you do. You kind of always coming with the most interesting stuff. So we appreciate you just as much because we know where this goes.
You're the next generation. So
and it's really
chop.
really positive, you know.
Big love, guys.
So much love all around.
Yeah, thanks.
And thank you to everybody who has sat through this conversation as well via the ether.
On CHATS.
Yes.
Thank you for listening this far.
Yeah.
Well done. You made it to the end.
Yoo-hoo.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Guys, that was really cool.
Yeah.